It was a rainy afternoon when Sarah found out that her daughter, Lily's favorite clothes were gone. She had spent hours picking out the perfect outfit for Lily's school play, a little green dress that twirled when she spun. Lily had worn it every chance she could get, even though it was too small now. Sarah had promised her that once she grew into it, they would find a bigger one. But today, the dress was gone. "Mom, where's my green dress?" Lily asked, her little voice quivering with worry as she looked through her closet. Sarah's heart sank. I don't know, Sweetie," Sarah said, trying to mask the panic in her voice. She checked the laundry, her eyes darting to the neatly stacked piles of clothes, hoping to find it there. But it was nowhere. The dress was gone. And then, as if on cue, Sarah remembered the last time she had seen the dress. It was when her in-laws had come over to help with the cleaning. They had stayed for the weekend, offering to help around the house. But Sarah hadn't been entirely comfortable with the way they'd started treating Lily's things, especially her clothes. Sarah had noticed over the years that her in-laws held a certain air of superiority when it came to family matters. They didn't just hover around, they were always making decisions without asking. Like when Sarah's husband, Mark, had agreed to let his parents help with Lily's birthday party last year. His parents insisted on buying all the decorations, and Sarah had been too tired to fight it. But it wasn't just the party. It was the little things, the comments about how Sarah should raise her daughter, or how she should be doing more with Lily's education. Sarah couldn't help but feel the tension every time they visited. It was like her in-laws felt that Sarah wasn't quite capable of being the mother she wanted to be. It wasn't until Lily asked her again about the green dress that Sarah realized what had happened. Her in-laws, in their attempt to clean up the house, had gone through the closet and discarded what they considered old clothes. Sarah was furious. The green dress wasn't old, it was a treasure to her daughter. It wasn't just fabric, it was a memory of how far they had come as a family. That night, Sarah sat down with Mark. The two of them had been drifting apart lately. Between work and the kids, they had barely spent any real time together, and the tension in their marriage was palpable. But tonight, it wasn't just their relationship that was at risk, it was their entire family dynamic. "Mark, I need you to listen," Sarah said, her voice shaking with emotion. "Your parents took Lily's favorite dress and threw it away like it meant nothing. They've been treating us like we don't matter, like I don't know how to raise our daughter." Mark was quiet for a long time. He had always been close to his parents, but Sarah could see the conflict in his eyes. "I didn't know they did that," he said finally. "But maybe they just didn't understand how important it was." "That's the problem," Sarah exclaimed. "They never understand. They think they know best. They think they can make decisions for us, and they've been doing it for years. This is the last straw. I'm done." Mark stared at her, the silence between them heavy with unspoken words. He didn't know what to say. He had always let his parents walk all over him, and now Sarah was ready to take a stand. The next day, Sarah confronted her in-laws. It wasn't an easy conversation. Her heart pounded as she stood in front of them, feeling the weight of years of built-up resentment. They had no idea what they had done, and Sarah was determined to make them understand. "How could you throw away Lily's favorite clothes without asking?" Sarah asked, her voice trembling with frustration. "She loved that dress. It wasn't just some old thing. It was a memory, a part of her childhood, and you just discarded it." Her mother-in-law, Joan, looked at her with an air of indifference. "Oh, Sarah, it was just a dress. We were cleaning up the house, trying to make room for new things. You're always so sentimental about everything. Maybe you should let go a little." Sarah's blood boiled. "It's not just a dress, it's about respect. You don't get to decide what's important to my daughter. You've crossed the line, and I won't stand for it anymore." Joan's face hardened, and for the first time, Sarah saw a flicker of guilt in her eyes. "I see, burglar, burglar." But instead of apologizing, Joan simply turned away. "I think you're overreacting, Sarah," Joan said. You're just being emotional. Maybe you should take some time to think about it. Sarah left their house that day with her heart heavy but resolute. She wasn't going to let them continue disrespecting her and her family. She had made her decision. She would cut ties with them, for good. She knew it wouldn't be easy, but it was the only way to protect her family. Mark, of course, didn't understand. He pleaded with her to reconsider. You can't just cut them out, Sarah. They're my parents. They're family. They're toxic, Mark. Sarah replied firmly. And they've been causing problems for far too long. I can't let them hurt Lily anymore. As the days passed, Sarah and Mark's relationship began to deteriorate. The tension in their home grew unbearable. Mark spent more time at his parents' house, trying to mend the rift, while Sarah focused on her own well-being and that of Lily. The emotional distance between them widened, and before long, Mark lost his job. The company he worked for downsized, and suddenly they found themselves struggling financially. The situation only worsened. Mark's parents, who had once been so eager to help, now offered nothing. In fact, they seemed almost pleased that Mark was going through hard times, as if it somehow validated their opinion that Sarah wasn't capable of managing things on her own. But Sarah wasn't going to let them win. With Mark out of work, they had to tighten their belts. Sarah took on extra shifts, working late into the night to make ends meet. She started cutting unnecessary expenses and learned to live within their means. But it wasn't easy. The stress of trying to keep the family afloat, coupled with the emotional strain of her relationship with Mark, was starting to take its toll. Then, one afternoon, Sarah received an unexpected call. It was Joan. She had come to her senses, or so she said. I've been thinking about what you said, Sarah, Joan said, her voice tentative. I'm sorry for what we did. I didn't realize how much it hurt you and Lily. Can we talk? Sarah was hesitant. The anger she had felt in that moment of confrontation was still fresh, and part of her didn't want to let her in-laws off the hook so easily. But, after everything they had been through, part of her felt like this might be her only chance to salvage something, whether it be for her marriage, her family, or just for closure. I don't know if talking is enough, Joan, Sarah replied, her voice steady, but tinged with the hurt that still lingered. You've crossed a line, and I'm not sure I can just forgive and forget. There was a long pause on the other end of the phone. Sarah could almost hear Joan gathering her thoughts. I understand, but we were wrong. Your father and we've been thinking. Mark's been struggling, and we know we should have been there for you. We're sorry. Can we come over and talk face to face? Sarah thought about it for a moment. What was the point? Could this really fix things, or was it just going to be another one of their empty apologies? But something inside her told her that, for the sake of her family, she should hear them out. All right, come over tomorrow. The next day, Joan and her husband, George, arrived at Sarah's house. Mark was sitting on the couch, looking exhausted, his face drawn from the stress of the past few weeks. Sarah greeted them coldly, unsure of what to expect. Thank you for agreeing to meet with us, Joan said, her voice softer than usual. She looked older in that moment, less sure of herself. George, on the other hand, was silent, his face a mask of guilt. Listen, Sarah, we realize that we've treated you and Lily unfairly, Joan continued. We've always thought we knew what was best, but we see now how much we've hurt you. Sarah folded her arms across her chest. You didn't just hurt me, Joan. You hurt Lily. And that's something I don't think I can ever forgive. I understand, Joan said, her voice trembling. But, please, we want to make it right. We don't want to lose our family over something so trivial. We've been wrong, and we know it. The words hung in the air, heavy with unspoken history. Sarah glanced at Mark, who was looking at his parents with a mixture of frustration and longing. He wanted to believe them, but Sarah could see the doubt in his eyes. They had been here before, apologies that came too late, promises that never came true. Sarah had heard enough. She needed to say her piece, to finally express the emotions that had been festering inside her for so long. "I'm not sure what you want from me," Sarah said, her voice quiet but firm. "You've spent years treating me like I don't know how to be a mother, like my choices don't matter, and you've hurt Lily. You didn't just throw away a dress, you threw away a part of her childhood, a part of her memories." Joan opened her mouth to speak, but Sarah cut her off. "No, I'm done being polite. I don't need your approval anymore. I never have. You've always thought I was too sentimental, too emotional, but I'm tired of pretending I don't care." Mark's eyes met hers, and for a brief moment, Sarah saw a flicker of understanding there, perhaps even a hint of guilt. The conversation lingered for hours. It was filled with awkward silences and strained apologies. Joan and George expressed regret, but Sarah could feel that something had shifted. The facade of their perfect, picture-perfect family was starting to crumble, and they couldn't put it back together. In the end, they left without a resolution. Joan apologized again, but Sarah felt no warmth in it. She was no longer looking for closure from them. She had already closed that chapter of her life. As Sarah watched them walk out the door, she felt a sense of finality. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about reclaiming her life, her family, and her own peace of mind. And that meant cutting ties with her in-laws for good. The days that followed were difficult, but Sarah felt a strange sense of freedom. She didn't have to navigate the complicated web of guilt and obligation that her in-laws had woven around her for so long. She no longer had to be the one to hold everything together, to constantly keep the peace. But there was still Mark. He wasn't ready to let go of his parents yet, and Sarah knew it. They tried to make things work, but the cracks in their marriage were widening. Mark still visited his parents, trying to smooth things over, but every time he came back, there was a new tension between them. Sarah knew that their relationship could never go back to what it had been, but despite all the turmoil, Sarah began to focus on herself. She poured herself into her work, she took up new hobbies, and she started rebuilding her relationship with Lily. The strain in her marriage didn't consume her as much as it had before. She was stronger than she realized, and she had to be for her daughter. Then, things started to shift. Mark began to see the impact his parents had had on their family. Slowly, he started to distance himself from them, realizing that the unhealthy dynamic had been suffocating their happiness. It wasn't easy, but the more Mark reflected on his marriage and his role in it, the clearer it became. Eventually, Mark apologized to Sarah. "I was blind," he said, sitting across from her at the kitchen table. "I let them interfere with our lives for too long. I let them undermine you, and I let it hurt our family. I'm sorry." Sarah felt a weight lift off her shoulders. The apology wasn't the fix to everything, but it was a step forward. Mark's realization didn't happen overnight, but as time passed, things started to improve. The financial struggles continued, but they found ways to make it work. Sarah kept working hard, and Mark took on freelance work to bring in extra income. They learned to live without the luxury they once had, and it brought them closer together. Meanwhile, Sarah began to rebuild her own network of support. She reconnected with old friends, joined a local moms group, and even started a small blog about parenting and self-care. She was thriving in ways she hadn't imagined possible. Despite the tension that remained between Sarah and her in-laws, she felt more once again filled with ease that can be freed from her face. She had learned that her family, her own small unit with Lily and Mark, was enough. They didn't need the approval of anyone else. Her in-laws, however, hadn't changed. Joan and George continued to live their lives as if nothing had happened. And though they occasionally reached out to Mark, they never truly apologized. They still didn't understand the gravity of what they had done. But Sarah no longer cared. She had found peace in her own way, and that was all that mattered. In the years that followed, Sarah and Mark continued to build their life together. They learned to appreciate the simple things, the quiet moments, the laughter around the dinner table, and the way their little family had come to thrive without the interference of others. Sarah had found success on her own terms, and in the process, she discovered that family wasn't just about blood. It was about those who respected and supported you. As for her in-laws, they eventually faded into the background of her life, a distant memory. And for Sarah, that was enough. She had learned the hard way that cutting ties wasn't about leaving people behind, it was about making room for the right ones to enter. Months turned into years, and life started to settle into a new rhythm. Sarah and Mark, although still adjusting to their changed circumstances, found comfort in the little victories of everyday life. Their financial struggles lessened as they worked together, and although it was a far cry from their former lifestyle, they had something far more important now: respect, love, and an unshakable bond. Lily was flourishing in her own way. She had started school, and with every passing day, she became more confident. Sarah was proud of how resilient her daughter was, how she had overcome the pain of losing the relationship with her grandparents without letting it define her. They found new family traditions, ones they created together, and Sarah found herself laughing more often than she had in years. She had learned that the love of her immediate family, the people who stood by her through thick and thin, was all she really needed. But then, just as Sarah thought everything was finally falling into place, she received a letter. It was from Joan and George. The envelope was thick, as if they had poured a lot of words into it. Sarah's first instinct was to tear it up and throw it away, but she paused. It had been so long. Maybe, just maybe, this was their attempt to make amends. She sat down at the kitchen table, Lily playing in the next room, and opened the letter. It was filled with apologies. Sincere, long-winded apologies. Joan expressed regret for everything, from throwing away Lily's clothes to the way they had treated Sarah. There was even an apology to Mark, acknowledging the emotional toll their actions had taken on him. The letter concluded with a request to meet, to finally make peace, to start fresh. Sarah read the letter through twice, her heart heavy. Part of her wanted to believe them, to welcome the possibility of healing, but another part of her, the part that had fought so hard for her family's well-being, was skeptical. She had built a new life, one free from the toxicity they had brought into her home. Mark, who had been silent until now, spoke up. "I think we should meet with them," he said cautiously. "Maybe this is our chance to heal, Sarah. Maybe we can finally move forward." Sarah looked at her husband, her mind torn. She had spent so long rebuilding their life, and now it felt as if they were being asked to open the door to all the hurt they had put behind them. But in the end, she knew that the choice was hers to make. It wasn't about forgiveness anymore. It was about setting boundaries, about not allowing the past to destroy the peace they had fought for. "I'll go," Sarah said finally. "I'll go," Sarah said finally. "But only if we go in with clear boundaries. I won't let them hurt us again." The meeting was scheduled for the following weekend. Sarah and Mark sat across from Joan and George at a quiet cafe, their faces tired but hopeful. It was an awkward, tense moment, but both families were determined to find some sort of resolution. Joan spoke first. Joan spoke first. "We've thought a lot about what happened. Sarah, about the way we treated you and how much it hurt you and Lily. We can't take back what we did, but we want to move forward. We want to be a family again." George nodded in agreement, his face full of remorse. "We've been selfish, and we're truly sorry for the pain we caused." Sarah's heart ached as she listened, but she couldn't ignore the part of her that had already closed that door. "I appreciate your apology," she said quietly, "but I've moved on. I've built a life that doesn't rely on your approval or your interference." Mark looked at Sarah, and for the first time in a long while, She saw the understanding in his eyes. He wasn't asking her to forgive them, nor was he asking her to pretend that everything was okay. Joan and George fell silent, the weight of Sarah's words hanging in the air. They had hoped that this would be a chance to repair the damage, but Sarah had made it clear that she couldn't return to the way things were. The family dynamic had shifted too much. There was no going back. In that moment, Sarah realized that she didn't need their approval, and she certainly didn't need to carry the burden of their mistakes. She had found peace without them, and that was enough. The conversation ended quietly, with no grand resolution. Joan and George left the cafe, their heads low, understanding that their attempts at reconciliation were futile. Months passed, and the once strained atmosphere in Sarah's home began to feel lighter. The financial hardships that had once seemed insurmountable had lessened, and Sarah's self-worth had grown. She no longer felt the weight of her in-laws' disapproval on her shoulders. Her family, the one she had fought so hard to protect, was thriving. Mark, too, had grown more comfortable with the boundaries Sarah had set. Their relationship had become stronger because of it. They communicated better now, working together as a team. There were no longer hidden resentments or unspoken grievances. Lily was thriving in school and had even started playing soccer, something Sarah never would have allowed if she had still been caught in the emotional web of her in-laws' influence. And then one day, as Sarah was sitting on the porch, enjoying a quiet afternoon with Lily, she received a call from her brother. His voice was bright and cheerful, a stark contrast to the storm of emotions that had clouded her life only a few years ago. "I have some news for you," he said. "Mum and Dad are finally moving to a new town. They want to start fresh too." Sarah was taken aback. It had been a long time since her parents had made any attempts to reach out. But her brother continued, "They wanted to let you know they understand why you had to do what you did. They've been talking a lot, and they get it now. They're sorry for everything." Sarah felt a warmth spread through her chest. She didn't know what would come of this new chapter, but for the first time in years, it felt like the family she had once known was trying to make amends. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress. That evening, Sarah sat down with Mark to talk. They had both come a long way since that fateful day when Lily's dress had been thrown away. They had learned to set boundaries, to protect what mattered most, and to put their family first. Mark reached for Sarah's hand, his eyes full of gratitude. "We made it, didn't we?" he said softly. "I never thought we'd get here, but we did." Sarah smiled, squeezing his hand. "We did, and we'll keep going." They didn't need anyone's approval anymore. They had found success, not in wealth or status, but in their own strength and unity. As for Joan and George, they continued to live their lives. But Sarah no longer felt the need to look back. Their attempts at reconciliation were a distant memory. She had learned the true meaning of family. And it wasn't about blood, it was about respect, trust, and love. In the end, Sarah had taken the most difficult step. She had let go. And by doing so, she had found peace and happiness she never thought possible. As Sarah sat back and reflected on everything that had transpired, she realized that the hardest decisions were often the ones that led to the greatest transformations. Her family was no longer defined by the expectations or interference of others. They were finally living for themselves. Sarah had fought for her family. She had protected them from the toxicity of the past, and in doing so, she had created a future full of promise and peace. The journey hadn't been easy, but it had been worth every step.